My name is Bruce Allen Cromell Jr. and I was a interior communications electrician's third class when I left the Navy. So on the way into the Straits of Hormuz, we came across a freighter, the Tabuk, which was on fire. Its engine room had a fire and they were all lined up on the fantail of the ship, ready to abandon ship. So we stopped, we threw over the utility boat, threw a P-250 pump in there and sent some of the guys from our division, some damage control men over there. They went over, put the fire out for them, and basically saved our ship. And, I don't know what happened. I don't know if they were able to get their engine started or they called like a tow from a seagoing tugboat or what, but we left. We went through the Straits of Hormuz, and I don't remember, we went through general quarters, but I don't remember being harassed much through that. But that's a technically hairy place to go through because Iran actually owns both sides of the real estate on that. It's not, they own one side, and you're going through a bend like this. So they have gun emplacements in 3 different locations, plus they have speedboats running around and all this other crazy stuff. Normally they harass us, but I don't believe they did. They didn't harass us personally when we went through. So we got in the Gulf, and we went to, we anchored off of Bahrain, and the Wisconsin was already there. So I remember when we anchored, we came out, we could see the Wisconsin, we could see the Mercy and the Comfort, the 2 hospital ships. And they're huge. So that gave us kind of, at least me anyway, a little bit of pause in the fact that, you know, we're entering into a difficult period. I think maybe 2 weeks passed, or a week, 10 days after we got into the Gulf, that we actually went to general quarters and we started shooting. We shot a salvo of Tomahawk missiles. And I think we did that at like 0300. And we stayed at general quarters for several days, straight. And as we fired missiles, we would move to a different position and fire missiles. Over the course of our time there, we fired 28 missiles. So one of the things I can say about that is later on towards the war, once they had pushed inland and we were in a safe position, we were allowed to go out and watch some of the launches. So we didn't have GQ yet, basically missile firing quarters where the FCs and the guys that shoot the missiles off would be at their post, but everybody else could go like on a fantail and watch the missile shoot. Well, they were going to shoot one and it didn't leave the tube, so it got stuck. The fuse pins on it didn't blow, and so we were on the fantail, and the armored box launcher's open, and the missile is in there. It's got a 1,000-pound warhead, and there's no place to go, basically. So after the booster rocket fired all the way through and stopped, they closed the hatch and they flooded it with seawater. Well, as they're doing that, they're ringing the fire alarm, basically, to muster the flying squad to have them go and fight this potential fire. So you got half the guys running towards the calamity and half the other guys trying to figure out how are we going to get, there's no place to go. If it blows up, we're going to either get swept over the side or we'll be killed on the deck. So luckily they closed the armored box launcher and they flooded it, and the missile, you know, basically went out, didn't detonate or anything like that. One of the jobs I had at the time was I was on the FC team, which took care of those switches. So in the Marine shack, the guard shack, I used to have to go down to this Marine guard shack. They had a panel in there. They had all alarms for the dispersing office, because the Marines provided security on the ship. So I would have to go down there and sit on a footlocker, and I'm not lying here, a footlocker full of John Wayne war movies and stuff like that, by some gunny sergeant would be sitting like right there telling me how much he hates squids. The whole time I would be sitting in front of that panel. So we would have to we'd have a guy up there, he would be checking the switches, and there would be a guy down here that would have the key to disable the alarm system so that we could go to the maintenance. And that was always an interesting endeavor with my Marine shipmates. And one of the things I can remember about the Marines that I like to tell is they had a new guy on the ship, and they had a security alert drill. They used to have security alert drills, which the Marines would go through the ship and secure it. Well, they had different code words for how they would do that. So we knew what those were. So basically, when they would do that, the sailors would have to sit down on the deck or stand, usually sit on the deck, while they ran around and secure the area. Well, one of the newbies was running, he forgot to flip his M16 up, and he hit the, we have P-ways, and sometimes there's doors, sometimes there isn't, but it's shaped kind of like a big oval. Well, you can fit kind of two guys through there, but you got to hop and duck at the same time. But you also have to spin your rifle up like this because the rifle's too big to go through. So he was running, he forgot to do that, and he hit it. And he flipped right over the gun, landed on the deck, and his sidearm, his magazine, his canteen, his helmet, and the three guys behind him, they all piled up on each other. So we were all sitting there, laughing at him, of course, because that's what we did. And I think he even bet the damn M16, we did. And so they got his stuff up. But then when we would go up to the missile decks to do our checks, they'd have to pat us down. So, it was always this kind of love-hate relationship with those guys. And when I was in aft IC, the NCO berthing used to be right next to our shop. So the corporals and sergeants would come in, because we had air conditioning, and would hang out with us. So I knew most of those guys. So it was always fun. The other thing, when they'd have a security alert drill and a fire drill at the same time, that happened a few times. So you'd have the guys that, the firemen with axes, picks running, and then you'd have the Marines running, and it was just a cluster. They'd be shouting at each other to get each other out of the way and this and that. So anyway, getting back to the Gulf, we fired our missiles, then we went and we had to do gunfire support. The Iraqis invaded Saudi Arabia in a town, I think called Khafji, if I remember right. And they, so the Marines were, called us to do some fire support for them, and we had this little plane. It was the precursor to these drones, basically. It was a plane maybe, 10 feet long with a wingspan, well, maybe not even 10 feet, 8 feet, maybe with like a 10-foot wingspan. And they had this little contingent of guys that would come. They came and they basically had a remote control. They'd set this little plane up, had a wooden prop on it, and they'd pull it like an old lawnmower. They'd start it up, and it had a rocket underneath it, a little rocket. So they'd shoot this plane off the side of the ship, and it had a camera on it. And they could put different cameras on it, infrared cameras or normal light cameras. And they'd shoot this plane off, and it would go up, and inside the ship they would pipe it into the closed circuit TV system. So you would get a picture of what the plane camera was seeing, and it would plot an X or a box, I think, on the target area, and then it would have a range going back to the ship with an azimuth and a direction. So the fire controlman could then use that information to get a firing solution. So they would fly this plane over, and it would find the target, and then we would start, we'd shoot around for effect, and then it would let loose. And so, we would see, it was interesting because you could see the Iraqis in their bunkers and trucks, and then we would shoot around and we'd hit, and like one instance, I think we hit a truck and you could see the tire from the truck flying through the air. At the time, I was like 19, 20 years old. I didn't have a lot of, I didn't really know how to feel about that. After I've thought about it later on, I felt kind of sorry for those guys. They really didn't know, they really had no clue what was going to be wrought on them. As far as one of those shells hitting the ground, you don't have to get close. You just got to get within like 75 yards. It destroys everything. So we did that a few times, after a while, they got wise to that little plane, and they actually shot one down. We were sitting at general quarters, and they even tried shooting some artillery back at us, but they, our rounds traveled 23 miles. I think their artillery pieces were only 14-mile range, so if we were at 16, 17 miles, they didn't have any effect on us. But they actually shot down one of our little remote planes. I think they had 4 or 5 of them. One lost its mind and just flew right on past the ship, and they never recovered it. One they shot down. One, they had a big net that they would fly it into, and it would kind of tip over and had like a bungee on it. It wasn't set right once, and it just smashed into the deck when it flipped over. But that one that they shot down, we were all sitting there, and we couldn't figure out, what is that? We saw these, like, it was tracer rounds basically going, and then finally they shot it down.